I was reading comments from someone who is on my side of this for the most part, was for restoring Point Reyes, for removing ranching from Point Reyes. But this person felt that the parties that were working to get ranching out should have done something to accommodate the ranch families that were leaving. I'm sorry, not the ranch families, because those people are being accommodated. The ranch hands, the workers, the people that were doing labor out on those farms as employees. And to be clear, there is some compensation. About $100,000 per ranch worker family. But I guess the sentiment is that these families should have been taken further into consideration during the negotiations. I don't know anyone in the group that fought against the corruption that was taking place in Point Reyes National Seashore that wanted bad things for the ranch hands, the farm workers. But, to say that groups who are negotiating to bring ranching to an end, that already should have brought ranching to an end, need to be worried about providing job security or housing for the employees of the people that shouldn't even be there. Well, it sets an interesting precedent, because where does this begin and where does this end? There are a lot of people who face hardship when they lose their jobs. In their future, their well-being, their housing, well, too bad. People lose their jobs. Figure it out. Not in this case. I've spoken on numerous occasions that, right or wrong, this is a double standard from how people usually approach those who face financial hardship. But today I had a new thought. Why are they so unprepared for the hardship of losing their jobs? Like, a lot of people, especially people who have worked for an employer for as long as these people worked for an employer, will have some sort of a compensation from that employer waiting for them. Some sort of a severance package. Or how about filing for unemployment? I mean, some of these ranch hands worked for those ranchers for 30 years. You don't have unemployment benefits after working for someone for 30 years? Well, why is that? As many years as these people put in, they should be at least temporarily taken care of via benefits. There are no benefits. Why aren't there any benefits? Why did these ranchers find ways to employ people while circumventing providing benefits? Maybe an equally important question is, how am I the only one asking this? Why isn't anyone upset that the ranchers are once again escaping free of any responsibility, any accountability for how they treated these people? Let's talk about housing for a little bit. Let's talk about the housing that these ranch hands enjoyed, or I don't know if all of them enjoyed it. I interviewed a couple of people who didn't enjoy the housing, but it is negotiated into their salary. It's a way of reducing their wage. Now, what's really crazy about that is that we are essentially providing that housing. We, the taxpayer. How? What am I talking about? Well, the ranchers are paying a criminally low lease fee for insane amounts of land that have housing structures on them. It's basically free for the ranchers to be able to provide this housing, but they get to negotiate it into a lower wage. Let's remember, this is the Bay Area. This is very valuable. I would accept a lower wage. I would forego benefits if I had a place to live as a part of my job. That part isn't weird. In terms of the employees, yeah, I would sign up. It's really not that surprising that the ranch workers are upset and stressed out about the new situation that they face, because most people can't afford housing in the Bay Area. It's not just ranch workers that can't afford housing in the Bay Area. Most people can't afford housing in the Bay Area. So it's not even nearly as important that they lost their jobs as ranch hands. It's that they lost their housing that was included with the job. Okay, speaking of housing, I've got to go back to a ranch in particular that really got on my radar in 2021. This is the McClure Ranch. This is a ranch the size of Golden Gate Park. Imagine having as much land as Golden Gate Park to work with, and having housing structures on that land that you can provide to employees as a part of negotiating their wages. And what do you think the person is paying for this land and these housing structures? The equivalent of Golden Gate Park. $3,500. In other words, we, the taxpayer, are covering the actual value of that land. We, the taxpayers, have been allowing, some of us unknowingly, some of us knowingly, and still without choice, for ranchers to operate inside of a national park almost expense-free. And now that those manipulative millionaires are getting paid again, somehow this genuine rage or fake rage and despair for the farm workers is once again pointed at anyone except for the ranchers themselves. A few thoughts to ponder as I wrap this up, because I don't know which one you should be the most upset about, the most perplexed about, or perhaps even a little bit embarrassed that you never even considered before. How do people work for an employer for 30 years and not have some sort of a savings, some sort of a backup plan? How poorly were these people being paid? Even if housing was negotiated into the wage, how is there no severance? 30 years of labor and no benefits? No unemployment benefits? What's the retirement account look like? Do these ranchers provide a 401k? When ranch hands are terminated as a direct result of a settlement that came from justified lawsuits against the ranchers and the Park Service, why is this the time to suddenly be concerned? Because ranch hands have been getting fired from ranches in Point Reyes and the surrounding area for decades. This is the first time I've heard anyone pretend to care about these people. We have to answer those questions, or at least a couple of those questions, before we move on to the next phase of this. Which of those questions did you find the most perplexing or the most important to have answered? Let me know in the comments.